Before we begin, I want to take a moment to honor the cultures behind the stories we are about to explore. The tales shared here come from many peoples, lands, and traditions. I do not change these stories to fit modern expectations or to align with today's social standards. Instead, I present them as they were told, sometimes beautiful, sometimes harsh, sometimes challenging. We are not here to judge the past, but to understand it, to listen, to learn, and to honor the ancestors who carried these stories forward. We also share stories from various religious traditions. These are presented in their historical and spiritual context, with respect for their beliefs that they represent. Every culture deserves respect, context, and acknowledgement, and this space is dedicated to doing exactly that. Story 1: Aruni in the Broken Embankment. The rainy season had settled over the forests of ancient India. Heavy clouds drifted across the sky each day, and the sound of falling water filled the groves surrounding the hermitage where the revered guru taught his students. The disciples lived simple lives beneath his guidance. They studied sacred teachings, tended fields, gathered firewood, and performed whatever tasks were needed to support the community. Learning was not separated from daily life. Wisdom was gained through service as much as through study. Among the students was a young disciple named Aruni of Panchala. He was earnest and hardworking, never seeking praise and never refusing responsibility. One afternoon, as rain swept across the field in silver curtains, the guru noticed that water was escaping from one of the irrigation embankments. If the breach widened, the crops to sustain the hermitage would be ruined. Calling Aruni to his side, Guru instructed him to go and repair the damaged bank. The young disciple bowed respectfully and set off through the rain. When he reached the field, he found a section of the earthen wall broken open. Water surged through the gap with surprising force, carrying mud and stones away as it rushed downhill. Aruni immediately began his work. He gathered wet earth and packed it into the breach, pressing it firmly with his hands. For a few moments it appeared to hold, but the pressure of the water soon tore it apart. He tried again, this time reinforcing the mud with branches and stones gathered from nearby ground. Once more the current broke through. Hour after hour he labored beneath the rain, his clothing soaked and his hands coated in mud. Yet every effort failed. As the daylight slowly faded, Aruni stood beside the rushing water and considered what to do. Returning to the hermitage without completing the task seemed unthinkable. His teacher had entrusted him with the responsibility, and the field still lay in danger. Looking at the opening one final time, he lowered himself into the breach and stretched his body across it. The cold water pressed against him, but the flow began to slow. Mud and debris collected around his body, gradually sealing the opening that his earlier efforts had failed to close. Though the rain continued and the evening air grew cold, Aruni remained where he was, determined to protect the field until help arrived. When darkness fell and Aruni had not returned, the guru became concerned. Gathering several students, he went out into the night searching for his disciple. They crossed the wet field, calling his name until at last a faint voice answered from the darkness. Following the sound, they discovered Aruni lying across the embankment. The guru hurried forward and helped him to his feet. When he learned what the young disciple had done, he was deeply moved. Aruni had not merely obeyed an instruction, perseverance. He had shown unwavering dedication, perseverance, and selfless service. The guru blessed him and declared that his commitment reflected the true spirit of learning. For generations afterwards, students continued to tell the story of Aruni. His devotion became a living lesson, passed from teacher to student like a seed carried forward through time. Story 2: The Elders Beneath the Acacia Tree. The drought began so gradually that few people noticed it at first. One season passed with less rain than expected, then another followed with even less. Before long, the grassland surrounding the village had turned brown beneath the relentless sun. Streams that once flowed steadily across the countryside became narrow trickles, and dust rose from the earth wherever the wind crossed the plain. At the edge of the village stood an ancient acacia tree, whose branches spread wide across the ground. Beneath that tree sat the council of elders whenever important matters arose. The people respected them not because they possessed wealth or authority, but because they carried the memory of many seasons. They had witnessed years of abundance and years of hardship, and their wisdom had guided the community through both. As the drought deepened, concern spread among the villagers. The spring near the settlement provided the only dependable source of water, and every family depended upon it. Farmers needed water for crops struggling to survive beneath the scorching sun. Herdsmen required water for their cattle and goats. Mothers worried about providing enough for their children. Before long, disagreements began to emerge. Arguments that once would have faded quickly now lingered. Some accused their neighbors of taking more than their share. Others claimed certain families arrived too early or stayed too long. Suspicion grew where trust had once existed, and the village chief feared that conflict might damage the community more severely than the drought itself. At last, the people gathered beneath the acacia tree and asked the elders for guidance. The council listened carefully as each person spoke. They heard the concerns of farmers, herdsmen, merchants, parents, and laborers. No one was interrupted. No judgment was offered too quickly. The elders understood that wisdom begins with listening. For most of the day, they sat in thoughtful silence. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, the oldest elder finally rose. Looking across the assembled villagers, he spoke quietly but firmly. "The spring does not belong to one family," he said. "It does not belong to one herd or one field. It belongs to all who depend upon it. If one household prospers while another suffers, eventually the whole village will suffer as well." The elders then proposed a plan. Times were established for collecting water. Families agreed to share responsibility for protecting the spring and maintaining access to it. Everyone would sacrifice something, yet everyone would receive what they needed. Though no solution could end the drought, cooperation could prevent the community from turning against itself. The villagers accepted the council's guidance. In the weeks that followed, the arguments diminished. People helped one another carry water, repair containers, and care for livestock. When the long-awaited rains finally returned, they found a village that had endured because its people chose unity over division. Years later, children still heard the story of the drought and the elders beneath the acacia tree. The memory survived not because of the drought itself, but because it revealed how wisdom planted in one generation can continue to nourish those who come after. Story 3. The 47 Ronin. In the days of the Tokugawa shoguns, honor governed the lives of the samurai as surely as law governed the cities in the north of Japan. Every warrior served a lord, and loyalty to that lord was considered a sacred duty. Among many samurai who lived during this age was a noble daimyo named Asano Magori, whose fate would give rise to one of Japan's most enduring tales. Asano had been assigned an important responsibility at the shogun court in Edo. There, he was expected to learn the proper ceremonies and etiquette required for receiving imperial envoys. Assisting him in these matters was a court official named Kira Yoshinaka, a man known for his pride and sharp tongue. Day after day, Kira insulted and humiliated Asano, mocking him publicly and treating him with contempt. For a time, Asano endured the abuse in silence. It came a day when his patience finally broke. In a moment of anger, he drew his sword within the shogun's castle and wounded Kira. Though the injury was minor, the offense was grave. Drawing a weapon within the castle was forbidden. The shogun ordered Asano to take his own life according to the customs of seppuku, and his lands were confiscated. When their lord died, Asano's samurai lost both their master and their positions. They became Ronin, masterless warriors without a lord to serve. Many expected them to disperse and seek new lives, but their leader, Oshi Kurinosuke, believed their duty to Asano remained unfinished. For nearly 2 years, the Ronin concealed their intentions. Some took humble jobs, while others appeared to abandon the warrior's life entirely. Oshi himself behaved so casually that spies sent by Kira eventually reported that the former samurai no longer posed any threat. Yet beneath the surface, the men remained united by a single purpose. On a snowy winter night, the 47 Ronin gathered in secret and marched through the streets of Edo. Divided into two groups, they surrounded Kira's estate and launched their attack. The defenders fought fiercely, but the Ronin pressed forward with discipline and determination. Room by room, they searched the estate until they finally discovered Kira hiding within a storage building. Oshi offered him the chance to die honorably as Asano had done. When Kira refused, the Ronin carried out their duty themselves. Having completed the mission they believed honor demanded, they carried Kira's head to Senjaki-ji Temple and placed it before their lord's grave. The authorities could not ignore their actions, yet many admired their loyalty. The shogun ultimately ordered the Ronin to commit seppuku, rather than suffer execution. They obeyed without resistance, accepting their fate in the same devotion that had guided them from the beginning. Their graves remained together, Sengaku Ji, and for generations people have remembered them as examples of loyalty, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to duty. Story 4: The Bard Who Remembered. Long before books became common in Ireland, knowledge traveled through memory. History, genealogy, law, poetry, and legend were entrusted to bards, men and women whose training required years of discipline. Within the bardic schools scattered across the countryside, students devoted themselves to mastering the art of preserving wisdom through spoken word. One old tale tells of a young student who entered a renowned bardic school hidden among wooded hills. The school stood beside a river whose waters reflected the changing sky, and its halls echoed each evening with poetry recited by flickering firelight. The masters who taught there demanded patience and dedication from every pupil who wished to join their ranks. The young student arrived eager to learn. He imagined that becoming a bard would involve singing heroic stories and entertaining noble courts. Instead, he discovered a life of rigorous study. Each day he memorized long genealogies, ancient laws, and poems whose verses stretched far beyond anything he had encountered before. The work seemed endless. While others slept, students often remained awake, repeating lines aloud so they would not be forgotten by morning. As the years passed, many students abandoned their studies. Some found the discipline too demanding, while others grew discouraged by the immense amount of knowledge required. The young student often felt the same temptation. There were evenings when the words blurred together, and mornings when he wondered if he would ever remember everything expected of him. One winter night, after struggling through a particularly difficult lesson, he sought guidance from an elder bard. The older teacher listened quietly before leading him outside. Snow rested upon the hills, and the river moved silently through the darkness. Pointing toward the water, the elder asked, "How did that river carve its path through stone?" The student considered the question. "Not in a day," he answered. "It happened little by little." The elder nodded. "So does learning." Those words remained with the young man. He returned to his studies with renewed patience. Instead of measuring his progress by what he had not yet mastered, he focused on each lesson as it came. Over time, the stories, poems, and histories took root within him. Years later, he completed his training and traveled through Ireland. In great halls and small villages alike, he recited tales of heroes, kings, saints, and ancestors. People listened because the bard carried something precious. He preserved the memory of those who came before and passed that memory forward to those who would follow. The old schools eventually faded, but their legacy endured through the stories they protected. The young bard's journey became a reminder that wisdom is planted slowly, nurtured patiently, and shared generously, much like a seed whose harvest may benefit generations yet unborn. Daily Thread for June 25th, The Seed. Every generation inherits something from those who came before it. Sometimes that inheritance takes the form of knowledge, traditions, values, skills, or stories. Sometimes it arrives through a teacher, an elder, a parent, a mentor, or a friend whose influence quietly shapes the course of a life. The ancient traditions often understood that wisdom rarely appears fully formed. Instead, it is planted like a seed. A lesson shared today may not reveal its full meaning for years. Advice offered during a difficult season may only be understood after experience provides the necessary context. The greatest teachers recognized that their purpose was not to control the future, but to prepare others for it. They invested in people they might never see fully mature, trusted that what was planted would eventually take root. Across cultures, those entrusted with knowledge understood that legacy is not measured by what one possesses, but by what one passes forward. Every act of teaching, mentoring, guiding, encouraging, or storytelling becomes part of a chain that stretches across generations. The wisdom we receive was once given by someone else, and the wisdom we share may continue long after we are gone. The old stories remind us that influence often grows quietly. Like a seed beneath the soil, it develops unseen before eventually emerging into the world. Not every lesson becomes a tree, but every tree begins as a seed. The question is not whether we are planting something through our words and actions, because we always are. The question is whether what we leave behind will nourish those who come after us.